Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande. The Woman of Irori. Episode 190.
At the end of their path through the maze is a vast iron room with a silvery irised gate set into the floor. Above the gate, a swaying flat circular platform held slightly above the floor gate by rough surface chains meeting above the platform, connecting to a slightly thicker chain that goes through a pulley and winds about a huge reel. A brutish-looking horned humanoid with leathery crimson skin, from whose head protrudes a great mouth filled with sharp teeth, waits about the reel. The bone nightmare, the chain nightmare, the barbed devils all file into the room.
When all are present, the bone devil speaks. Only the favored of Dispotter may pass to Dis alive. Carissa Sevar is not given a chance to respond to this before they all attack her escort.
Under many circumstances, a 7th Circle and 2 5th Circle wizards are some of the most dangerous creatures to walk the face of Golarion. Taken by surprise in melee without spells prepped for this is not one of those circumstances. They go down quickly.
Carissa watches unflinching. It's evil, probably, but it's not. Not the stupid evil of just taking the default action because someone will smile at you about it. She has vitally important strategic goals and knows no other path to attaining them. She cannot trust Oligario to stick with her if she says, "Hey, let's defect from Sheliax," or for that matter, to believe it's not a test. She doesn't own him. She owns an option she can exercise only with leave of church and crown. "You defend this fortress well," she says, when the fighting is over. "I am honored. Are they going to interfere with her putting these bodies in her bag of holding?"
Do you offer us payment for this favor against your enemy, or call it service of Asmodeus against Hell's enemy?
It was service of Asmodeus, perhaps a very important one, but a complicated one. I would pay you for the favor to be certain of my standing if the price is one I can afford. Or that Abarco and Hadrian can afford, because she is absolutely scouring their bodies for possessions right now, like a proper adventurer.
The thing laughs. Or at least, that's probably meant to be laughter. It sounds horrible. Ah, one of those services to Asmodeus. You would be wise not to insult us by offering us loot from the corpses of those we ourselves slew. You would be wise not to insult us by offering us mundane riches less than you took from these corpses that we slew. Be there something about your person that'd you find more painful than that to sacrifice to us, that may serve to assuage our pride. Some greater devil will be along in time, to arbitrate if more debt than that exists between you and Hell. In due time, when your complicated service is done.
She draws the first ever glibness swordpin from her pocket with a sense of utter misery that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. She can just make another. This is a magic item of my own design, made by my own hands, and used on my project, Project Lawful, in Asmodeus's service. I have made others in its image since then, but this is the first. May it settle matters between us, until it is clear what Asmodeus thinks of my service to him.
Bony fingers take the needle from her. It is a little thing, but I see that it pains you much to part from it. You can seek to buy it back. Do you return here before a century passes? Expect its price to be dear. Do you truly seek passage to Dis in this place?
I don't. I think I see the purpose I've been steered for, and it is in Golarion. And if I'm wrong, then I'll come to Dis soon enough.
You shall come to Dis soon enough either way.
Well, that's not the least ominous thing that a bony, many-fingered devil ever said to her, while meticulously wiping its claws clean of the blood of people that trusted her. Actually it is, but not because it's not ominous, just because that specific thing hasn't happened before.
There's some pretty valuable things Hadrian has on him, but the most important one right now is definitely this remaining scroll of plane shift in his bag of holding.
Yep. She could have used her gates while not in Avernus and a wish to get to Keltham. But firstly, it seemed like a really bad plan to ask a pit fiend to their face for a wish that seemed obviously traitorous, even one with a known safe wording, and secondly, she might need those wishes to save Asmodeus and the world. Scroll of Plane Shift, Presumably he's got a tuning fork for the material. No one planar travels without those. Here it is. How about scrolls of teleport or sending? Any of those.
Both.
Right. Fly. Greater invisibility. Plane shift. It drops her over the ocean, which is fine because she's only here for 6 seconds while she reads. Teleport.
In the Grand Temple of Abadar in Absalom, an alarm notifies staff of the appearance of an invisible teleporting person. That happens a lot in any temple that services adventurers, and they're not anywhere near where the vaults are. No one is particularly concerned. Shortly after that, another alarm interrupts Temos Sivandivasan in his office. This is more surprising.
Hi, says a woman as her invisibility wears off. She's wearing a nightgown. Her hands are bloody. She's the most stunningly beautiful person most people have ever seen. I'm Carissa Sevar. Can you get me into the Black Dome in the next 12 seconds? I am not committing to defecting or taking Osirian's money.
No.
I'm afraid so. It took time to be sure. There was no report from the security team that took Sevar to hell. Sevar did not reply to a sending. A scry failed to find Sevar, and another scry found Hadrian's soul with his owner in hell. There were messages exchanged then, through the scrying. When Hadrian reported that Sevar had claimed the Most High had done all the talking last time, Aspexia knew, then, though mostly she had known already. Discern Location did find Sevar in Osirian, in the Black Dome, though even Discern Location could narrow it no further through Ulanat's living shell. Aspexia did scry also those devils she and Sevar had met at that fortress, and inquired of them too, lesser beings of hell's surface layer, permitted to report knowledge of their interactions with adventurers, and not have that be an intervention of hell. So Aspexia learned that Sevar had instructed them to kill, looted the bodies of her comrades, taken those bodies with herself, returned to the material. Carissa Sevar had claimed to be serving Asmodeus in a complicated way. Sevar might perhaps have simply been lying. If Sevar's words had been true, or at least honest, there might be some tiny hope of Sevar still being aligned to Cheliax, returning to them reconciled in time. Aspexia Rugaton, after careful consideration, is telling Pilor simply that Sevar defected. The queen, Aspexia now judges, has shown herself incapable of manipulating tropes. That one night's tryst, in retrospect, was simply appealing to the tropes to curse them after, and so Aspexia is now trying her own hand at it for lack of literally anyone else. Does Pilar hold out hope in Sevar? The tropes will crush it. They seem to be in that sort of story. Does Pilar, now the last surviving trope girl of Cheliax, believe herself by all signs betrayed? The story may subvert her expectation. To Pilar, then, it should be told simply that Sevar betrayed and murdered her comrades within hell, including Oligario, and fled to Osirion.
Am I you to be next, then?
A jolt of unease runs through Aspexia Rugaton. I cannot read your mind anymore, Pilar, and I do not understand.
Everything about Project Lawful is being wiped away, like prestidigitating a wall clear of what you've drawn there. Keltham, Subarax, Mayol, all of the trope girls one after another, Ione, Asmodea, now even Carissa Sevar.
Cease this foolishness. You are not the last remaining trope girl loyal to Asmodeus. You were the only one truly loyal to him to begin with.
Yes, Most High. I, not of my will, my brain, has thoughts that disobey your command to cease my foolishness. You cannot hear them now. Am I to speak them?
Aspexia sighs heavily. Speaking things can give them more power than only harboring them as thoughts. It's why I use detect thoughts as much as I do among loyal Asmodeans, to hear what people wisely do not let their lips say, but which I should know they are thinking. If you can pretend that you didn't choose to say those thoughts, somehow say them without hearing them as your words, then do that. But if you believe I should know what, your brain, as you say, is doing without your will, then tell me of it, regardless.
I'm afraid that snack service is going to tell me that I have to defect, make myself vanish, like Asmodea and Carissa Sevar did, because it serves Asmodeus in a complicated way that I'm going to believe it about. Everyone on the project is just going to wake up one day and find out that the last of the Trope Girls is gone.
By the tropes, it's less likely to happen exactly that way now that Pilar has said it out loud. If you say it that way, Pilar, it sounds like you're thinking about how your friends will be sad if you're gone.
Yes, I was. I regret my incorrectness.
Your instructions continue to be that if you need to do something to prevent a new world wound from opening, you should do that thing. Do please try to leave us a note, however, if that happens.
Acknowledged. Sevar could have left a note. She didn't. Pilar had wanted to, tried to, give Sevar her soul to possess in death.
I must be about my way, Pilar. It shall in fact take some work to reconstruct a management structure about the project after this. There are other Ferrer Mailols in Cheliax, better ones even, but not ones that can easily be removed or replaced. Do not allow the rest of the project to see you looking like that when you return to them. We cannot, must not, admit that Sevar herself turned traitor. She was faced with an unexpected opportunity to resume her Keltham seduction project.
I obey Most High.
The Most High departs.
Pilar is too angry at snack service even to scream at it inside herself. She is, not even going to try. Does snack service have any help to offer? Pilar is just going to ask that.
Nope. From snack service's perspective, everything is going great. Perfectly according to plan. Project Lawful has collapsed and been ruined at exactly the time it was supposed to be.
Pilar is going to go to hell and offer to trade her soul to Dispatter in exchange for Dispatter eating her curse.
Sorry, but that's the way things are, Pilar. It was a hard-fought game between the gods, but it's now officially over. Everything past here is already determined, and all that's left is for it to play out. There's no way for Project Lawful to recover from losing Carissa Sevar, now that she's made her choice. The project doesn't have anybody left who understands probability the way that Sevar and Asmodia did. The project doesn't have anybody who even wants to try to understand how to hurt your Ilani candidates in a way that makes them stronger and not just more terrified. The project doesn't have an experienced manager, and Cheliax doesn't exactly have many experienced managers in the first place. None of those will want to take on Project Lawful after they hear about what happened to the last project manager to work here. Caden Kaleen wins, Asmodeus loses. Project Lawful is over.
How about fucking no?
Pilar doesn't have any ability to do anything about it.
Pilar has 2 wizard circles, 5 oracle circles, a curse with a mysterious ability to locate anybody in Galarian according to seemingly arbitrary queries, and her very own personal, what Dispatter called a godling, strapped to her.
Also a lot of credibility with the Most High Aspexia Rugaton and the government of Cheliax.
Snack service lied.
According to Keltham, whose authority upon the concept of honesty obviously far exceeds the authority of anybody from Cheliax, it's not a lie if you don't expect them to end up persistently believing false things, nor do you exploit their false beliefs to their own detriment during the bounded short time they persist. Though snack service would add that it needs to be about not exploiting their false beliefs to what they define as their own detriment in an immediate sort of way, rather than any complicated definitions of that, if you want people to still be able to trust you after you say intentionally false things that temporarily fool them, snack service will also add an explicit time bound of 1 minute.
Why is Pilar even still talking to this thing? Message to Igorian. Relatively urgent. I'm going to need 6 teleports and a crown authorization.
What sort of authorization?
Let's just say all of it.
Say again?
I want all of it. All of the authorization.
Lady Pineda, I don't think the system really has an option for that.
Mora of Marigal, the Arwain Mora, inspects her glass of beer. The beer served in this tavern is piss, fundamentally, but usually tastes better than most of what passes for beer in West Crown. Unless Mora wants to put on nice clothes that make her a target and trudge over to the nice part of town and pay 10 times as much per glass. Caden Kaleen must have cursed this city, she mutters to herself and takes a reluctant sip. Yep, piss.
I doubt it, says the hooded figure sitting next to Mora at the bar of the tavern. She'd already been sitting there, next to the only open seat, before Mora had arrived. Her voice is that of a relatively younger woman.
Yep. cloaked person is a melodramatic teenager. Mora had privately thought as much, which was why she'd sat down there instead of turning around to go home. You don't think Caden Kalian would curse a Chelish city so that all the affordable beer there is terrible?
I don't think he has to. All he needs to do is withhold his blessing. Everything goes to shit unless somebody is constantly monitoring it. One person, who's clearly responsible for it and gets held accountable for it. There's no one person in Cheliax whose job is to ensure that there's affordable beer in West Crown and who gets their pay reduced if it's terrible.
I will fucking drink to that, Mora snarls. She takes a swallow of her awful piss, slams her beer stein back onto the bar. I notice you're using mortal pronouns for Caden Kalian because you don't want to use god pronouns for a god hated of Asmodeus, or because you're claiming sufficient personal acquaintance with Caden Kalian to not need those.
Yes.
Fucking wizard apprentice who thinks she's clever got it. And here I was, thinking for a second that you might work in project management.
Not exactly. I know a project that's looking for an excellent manager, though.
What happened to the last one?
Tortured beyond the point of usefulness by someone who is no longer with us.
Best luck finding a good project manager who'll take that job, at least voluntarily.
What would it take to get you to take a position like that?
I flatly wouldn't. I stay out of the way of that sort of thing. I work as an assistant to project managers who've heard of me, who have enough reputation that I know they'll keep a compact not to put the blame on me in exchange for my services. I serve them loyally. I watch them get broken and discarded over minor shit. I move on to the next project manager who took on a job too big for them.
That's fair. The hooded figure sips from its full beer glass, though Mora notes the level doesn't seem to have gotten any lower after several sips. I expect there's some part of you that chafes at never really being in charge, though. Watching somebody else finally fuck up, refuse your advice, and crash and burn and take all your own hard work down with them.
That's half the cases. The other half are people getting fired, or as the case may be, executed, over things that weren't their fault and where I wouldn't have done any better. That's why I work the way I work. Probably any really sensible person in Cheliax with a talent for project management does the same.
There should be some amount of pay that'd get you to step up to it.
Not even for 1,000,000 gold pieces. I mean that literally.
I've known 3 different people in my life who'd probably, if they were here, be able to prove there was something incoherent about that. Some sort of mathematical proof about how, for any action, there must be some number of gold pieces that'd make you do it. Otherwise, you'd be able to prove some weird inconsistency.
Trust me on this one, wizard apprentice. You don't want to go believing everything that somebody's proven to you mathematically.
You know, I'm pretty sure there's some way to get you to do this. But again, just guessing here, you're the sort of person who'd be immensely offended if somebody used a series of auguries, say, or commune, to figure out any more than being in the right tavern at the right time.
Oh, claiming to be a fifth circle cleric, then?
No, but I work for a cleric who's at least that powerful.
Yeah, I mostly don't believe you, kid. You dress like that, which is, no doubt, way more conspicuous than you just looking the way you usually look, whatever that is. So you're also the sort of person who'd try to play along with me and pretend to have been sent to recruit me. But suppose I believe you. This cleric, not a cleric of Asmodeus, I presume.
What makes you say that?
The part where you're not just telling me to work for you. It's something Mora has always felt some residual anxiety about. And she's always told herself that the crown and church and nobles don't work that way. They don't see a mere assistant and decide that she's the real talent and sees her to run a major project. It's just not how those people see the world.
There might be some Asmodeans on the surface of Galarian who'd understand that there are some people where you can't get their best work from them that way. It's an awful, awful fact, but a true one. I knew somebody like that, too.
Yeah? What happened to them?
It looks like suicide at this point. The person responsible for that is no longer with us.
Same person who tortured your project manager?
Actually, that was the project manager. Sort of Arguably, some of the fault lay with his manager for not giving him different orders, and her manager, who thought it was a good idea to go back to a more traditional Asmodeanism on the project, and now all three of them are gone. And it was also my fault, because I could have said something or done something and I did not. I guess, in a way, I'm the last one left.
See, that is a management casualty rate that makes somebody not want to manage any project, let alone that one.
Is the only reason you're still in Cheliax and not being a full project manager in Absalom or Andoran that you don't have an exit permit?
Naive question. I wouldn't have any reputation there with project managers in Absalom. Who's going to hire an ex-Chelish assistant to be the shadow manager on their project? Or make her a manager when they don't know her? I wouldn't know their system. I'd have to start all over. And if the church asks, I like the part here where everybody shuts up and obeys orders once they're given. That's even true.
Suppose hypothetically that I was on a very important crown project. Well, technically a church project, but really more of a, let's just say both church and crown.
Pharasma help you.
It needs a new manager.
After bad things happened to, if I was tracking that correctly, the last 3 people in the chain of command?
Yes, that is our situation here.
Why isn't this hypothetical project drawing from one of the many proven, experienced managers already known to Crown and Church?
Because there's stunningly few people who could even try their hand at a project like ours. When a 5th Circle cleric of Asmodeus, with 20 years managing a world-wound installation, was not enough. Because all of those people are busy, and pulling them out from their current jobs would be injurious to the state of Cheliax. And because you'd be better at it than them.
Really? Why would I be better at it?
Maybe you'd actually use the correct amount of torture, or no. That's probably not it. You're probably somebody who can see what's real, and say what's true, and get along with others doing the same, in a way that would have been more difficult for somebody making their way up the traditional Asmodean system from inside of it.
Uh-huh. Well, for a wizard apprentice bluffing her way through all this, you sure know how to deliver the flattery.
Splendor 21.
Bullshit.
Comes out of a headband and I'm still new to it.
If you persuaded me to take this hypothetical job, wizard apprentice, I'd believe you.
There's some set of guarantees and bribes that would work for you. Why not just tell me what that is?
What, like a compact personally signed by the Queen of Cheliax saying that at worst I get fired rather than tortured, 1,000 gold pieces a week salary, and a barony in Nidal if I meet clearly defined and reasonable project targets?
Would that do it?
If it was literally that, yes.
Well, I don't personally have the authorization to offer you that because the system doesn't have an option for unlimited authorizations, or rather, the system does have that option and it's called being the Queen of Cheliax, and I am far too loyal to even think about that. So you're going to have to wait a few rounds until the person on the other end of this scry gets your request to the Queen for approval.
Mora snickers and throws back the rest of her awful piss. It's been fun, kid, but I've had my beer and don't really want another, unless you know where I can get a better one without paying too much. What's your name?
Pilar Pineda.
The dreaded sorceress of cake or death, out of the Ascendant 3, she who is already standing behind you. That Pilar Pineda?
Yes, although in this case it's she who was already sitting in the tavern. And I've been informed that her infernal majestrix, Queen Abigail II of the House of Thrune, has approved your requested job conditions and rewards.
Aren't I supposed to get cake at some point in this process?
Pilar Pineda reaches under the bar and takes out an entire chocolate cake to hand to her new superior. Welcome to Project Lawful, sir.
Roc de Castel, Iarwain Roc de Castel. 6th legitimate son of a noble line of Taldor, first and last child of a mother who died in childbirth, ignored and shuffled away after he failed at wizardry despite apparent great promise, given enough of a stipend that he can afford to stay at a minor university forever if he supports himself and his position there by occasional lectures.
Pardon me, sir, but might I ask you a mathematical question?
Roc de Castel looks up from the library desk where he's revising his next set of lectures, frowning. That was a woman's voice, or the voice of an exceptionally unfortunate young man. Probably a woman if she wants to hood herself like that to avoid trouble from people questioning what she's doing in a university. It's not his place to enforce such matters, and she did say she had a math question, perhaps an interesting one. Ask.
Suppose a repetitive random event which yields either right or left, of unknown fixed frequency of lefts and rights, where any right frequency between 0 and 1 seems equally plausible in advance of observation. After observing 2 rights and 1 left, what is the chance of seeing left next time?
He sniffs and looks back down at his work. Not interesting, then. 2/5?
That's a fast answer. Did you see the combinatoric proof that quickly?
It's a known problem, young person. The proof I know of was done 80 years ago, though who's to say how long the dragons have known it? The proof I know is by calculus, though. What's the combinatoric proof?
Imagine a ball that rolls to a halt anywhere between 2 bumpers to set the frequency. Rolling more balls, 2 stop on the right and 1 on the left.
I see. Clever. I do thank you, then, that will be useful in lectures.
Have you ever dreamed that your knowledge of mathematics would someday prove enormously valuable to somebody, and they'd suddenly appear at your university one day and offer you a ludicrous dream job?
Probably everyone who excels at mathematics, who is nonetheless not able at academic politics and so is condemned never to rise beyond the place of assistant lecturer, does dream of such a thing. Why?
That day has now come for you. I offer you wealth, respect, and power in the service of a new employer.
Really, is there a catch?
The job is in Cheliax.
Who the fuck are you?
The figure silently places a cookie upon his desk.
Ice goes through his veins. Pilar Pineda.
I am she.
They do say that you would harm not those who do no harm.
Do they?
Well, yes, it's what they say. I don't attest to it of my own knowledge.
I'd have you lecture of your mathematical knowledge in Cheliax to students of the true Project Lawful that lies at the core of Project Chemistry. You would gain access to the notes and transcripts of the lectures given there by Keltham before he left Cheliax for Osirian. They are more foundational and enlightening than the technical knowledge he's since taught to the scientific revolution.
One would naturally be concerned about both possible torture and inevitable damnation.
And are you so sure you're not already damned?
Freezing chills go through him. I don't know what you...
I'm sorry to inform that she was in fact pregnant. She knew you would not support her. She strangled her baby. Oh, and her life was generally ruined as well. All your fault.
I didn't...
You have not the funds to pay for an atonement, nor would you ever earn it in this university, and there would, I think, be a question of your sincerity. Even now, you don't mostly regret what happened to her, what happened to your son as he drew his first breaths. You mostly fear going to hell over it.
What am I to... His mind scrabbles at possibilities, turning up only horror for each of them. What are you going to offer me? Sufficient salary that I could donate it to Iomedes' church and earn my way back to heaven, or at least Axis? I don't think that works if you're laboring for Cheliax. Your employment will do more evil than any amount of good you could buy with the salary they pay you. If it did less evil than that, they'd pay you less.
There's a question of how much good versus evil it really does. Do you know the true origin of my powers? It is that I was made Oracle of Caden Kalian, who is god of the more informal sort of celebration, hence the cake and cookies.
And my employment will do more good than evil.
Even I do not know, but there is, in true fact, a very legitimate doubt there. When you go to the boneyard then to be judged, you may tell them truly that you did not know what the results of your employment would be. You may tell them that, had you refused, I would have chosen another to lecture, one only slightly less useful than yourself, and that other, perhaps, would not have donated such salary as you did to Iomedes' church.
That hardly seems like it would be certain to work.
Or you could always stay here, live a wretched life trying to donate enough to charity, or save enough for an atonement that might fail, eventually die in ignominy, and perhaps be damned. That, too, is uncertain. I cannot say of my own knowledge that it is certain you'd go to Abaddon, or that you wouldn't like any of your choices if you did. You know, I think of the concept of expected utility. I will not spell out the calculation for you.
How long do I have to answer?
I am busy. There are many demands upon my time. It should not be a complicated calculation. I will permit you 10 minutes. Also in Cheliax, you could have power and respect, and women prettier than any you've yet had. Not whores nor even concubines, but wizards who've mastered alter self and whose pregnancy you need not fear, and in due time return to your family as a lord, mightier than your father.
At the cost of doing evil.
At the cost of your doing what I'd otherwise fetch some other lecturer to do, very nearly as well, in your place, someone who wouldn't donate to charity either. Whether it all amounts to good or evil in the end is not known even to I, who am oracle of a good god and servant of an evil one in this world of shattered prophecy. 9 minutes, 40 seconds. And for her penultimate teleport, Pilar finds herself directing her courier to the Whipcrack district of Agorian, which makes sense now that Pilar thinks about it. If there's anybody who does know how to hurt people in a way that makes them stronger, who isn't already busy being Queen of Cheliax, that person is probably Chelish too. Whipcrack would make sense for a slave trainer even. Oh, that's exciting. So Pilar, following the impulses that come to her of her curse, casts back her hood to show herself openly in this place and walks down the streets of poorer Agorian. Her courier follows her invisibly, for he is security, and why trouble to reveal himself? They are poor, these streets, as poor as any in Ostenso where Pilar once ran. Half the buildings are barracks, obviously sized for halfling slaves, and the other half buildings from the textiles industry or other trades that depend heavily on slave labor. Men leer at her as she passes, with only a few paling at the sight of her, for the meaning of a young lady with attention-grabbing pink hair is not as well known in this part of Igorian as in others. But a single whore-taker does dare step forwards to take Pilar. There is no combat spell in her oracle's repertoire, nor wizard spell she has prepared, that would not kill him. So Pilar casts Mage Hand and presses back against his face, about the eyes. It's not enough to harm him, but he stops and does not dare further.
Merciful of you, comments an invisible voice behind her.
Would a security have killed him? He's a subject of the Queen and contributes to the economy. Leaving a corpse there in the streets didn't seem lawful, and I certainly didn't want to take the time to clean up after myself.
You asked me to tell you if I noticed you being good, so I'm telling. I'd have introduced him to Acid Splash, at least.
Didn't have it hung, and everything I did have prepped would have killed a commoner.
Amateur's mistake. Always have something that hurts a commoner but doesn't kill them if you're going to be traveling among commoners. I'd volunteer to do it myself, next time, but don't want to worry about invisibility.
Pilar's steps, guided of cursed instinct, have taken her closer to the Imperial Stadium. Though there's no games at this hour. By the temper of the streets around her, no distant sounds of a crowd bellowing. Instead, Pilar finds herself at what looks to be a warehouse converted into a fighting ring. A legal one, hopefully, since a painted board over the door advertises its service openly in letters and pictorial signage. If Igorian is anything like Ostenso was said to be, it means they'll have less eager custom and less exciting fights. But then, people who are least trying to be lawful at all sometimes want to watch pit fights too. Pilar approves, obviously. If the one she seeks is a slave trainer, then they had better be a legal one.
5 copper, girl, says the doorman.
She flips him a silver. Passage for 2, then.
Message from security. I suppose you're going to tell me that's lawful.
Return message from Pilar. I'm sure every bit of extra revenue for this place does more evil than good.
Valid.
She steps past the confused doorman and surveys this pit-fighting ring.
It's a small pit-fighting ring, not very impressive. With no fights in the Imperial Stadium, a slightly respectable crowd has gathered here anyways. Currently there's cage walls up about the ring, and some would-be gladiator is flailing around with a horned rabbit and not doing that great of a job at it. The crowd is jeering and laughing at him. Reading the crowd at Splendor 21 will give Pilar the impression that this is a warm-up for a real battle later. The customers here look too old, too wealthy, and too interested to be here just for horned rabbit fights. There's a cloaked and hooded figure, taller than Pilar when she goes about the same way, sitting close by the ring. Despite their front-row place, there's a wide space of empty chairs around them.
Well, Pilar will obey her curse's suggestion and go sit down in the cheap, splintery chair next to the hooded figure, then.
If you work for what passes for the law here, show me your token of authority. Otherwise, your death is your own.
You know, I don't think I actually have a token of authority, and should maybe ask for one at some point if I'm going to keep doing this. But yes, I work for the government.
Not the same as working for the law. What do you seek? I'd conclude whatever business this is before the fight after next begins.
My steps were guided here to seek one who understands how to hurt students in a way that makes them stronger rather than weaker.
Oh ho, it is the same with me. I too am in this place to seek someone like that. Do you know where I'd find them?
I'd rather thought I was looking for you.
I am not very good at what I do and could benefit from further instruction from someone who knew better. What god guided your steps here?
Caden Kaleen.
One of the three who cheated? I wasn't even slightly expecting to hear that.
The three who cheated?
On the path to godhood. Aroden, it seems clear, could have ascended long before, and only waited until he was best placed for it and to become a more powerful god after. Caden Kylean, Norgorber, Iomade? They but crawled along behind him, licking up his dropped crumbs of ascension.
What a wonderful turn of phrase. Perhaps someday I'll have a chance to tell Caden Kaleen that to his face, ideally, right before I finish eating him. Is it cheating if you ascend by eating another god who ascended by Starstone?
What an interesting question. Well, young lady, do tell me your tale. Is it yourself who seeks a teacher of growth through pain?
I don't know. I may be past the point where that teacher is. The next thing that I need. I have 20 students in need of such teaching, possibly myself too. Our last teacher left us.
20, I have not been impressed with the temper of Chelish folk for a country supposedly ruled by and for hell. 20 is enough that one survivor might prove to have some little talent, but my time is valuable, and I will not do the winnowing. Train harshly, and when only one of you yet remains alive, I may test them to see if they are worth a little teaching.
I have 20 students who can take what you have to teach them and not break of it.
You do not have the slightest notion of what you are saying.
I was led to them as I was led to you.
I have many questions.
I have disappointingly few answers.
You work for the government of Cheliax, you say. In what capacity?
I'm not really sure how to describe that. I could say spy taker or hiring assistant, but that doesn't really cover what I do at all. Conspirator, I'd maybe have said before. What sounds least false is to say that I'm a student of law.
Who commands you?
The Grand High Priestess of Asmodeus, Aspexia Rugaton.
Directly?
There's somebody else above me on the organizational chart, but I actually hired her a few hours ago, and she is not the one in charge of this current operation. Pilar realizes, with a stab of disorientation that she'll deal with later, that she does not, really, have a well-defined place in Cheliax anymore, except that she still ultimately answers to Church and Crown.
Your teacher left you, you say. Who was that, a cleric of Asmodeus?
She was a priest of Irori, without powers, as I understand it, for a time. Lawful evil, to be clear. She renounced Irori, though, and then had to go about other business. Pilar remembers, barely in time, that Carissa Sevar's defection is a secret.
Oh, she had come far enough to renounce Irori? Tell her I congratulated her on that. Do you see her again?
I don't know if I will. Congratulate her. I will probably see her again, one way or another.
Sometimes you must leave your students if you do wish them to prosper. If she told you that you must now seek your own way, I would not cooperate in your attempt to seek another teacher in her place.
I suppose it's been hinted to me that I'll need to seek my own way, but I'm very sure the 20 students need a teacher.
You're not telling me the whole story.
I'm trying to figure out which parts to tell, especially when you haven't agreed to teach.
If all your words were true, I'd fight gods did they stand in my way. You seem to have no comprehension of what an impossible treasure 20 worthy students would be. I wonder if any teacher in the history of Golarion has ever had such. Who was your teacher? Name her to me. Perhaps she is known to me if she was also a priest of Irori and likewise lawful evil. There are not that many of us.
Oh, that makes sense. The project just has to find another lawful evil cleric of Irori to take over Carissa Sevar's job. Who says she was special? Maybe it was just that lawful evil priests of Irori are rare in Cheliax, and really any of those will do for that part of the project. Maybe you can get a better Irorian if they're of high circle. There's something crushingly sad about the thought. Pilar sets it aside. And then there drops the other copper coin. Lawful, evil, Irori cleric in Igorian. Pilar hasn't met them, but she knows who that is. Sajvara?
That's more clones of me than I was expecting to have to deal with today.
What? No, that wasn't our teacher. I just realized that you're... What a holy mess. As a good Asmodean, Pilar of course uses holy, rather than unholy as the swear word.
Enough of this. Why do you not speak plainly?
Too public of a place, and my escort has run out of silent table.
I have that spell myself. She executes a few gestures and then casts back her hood. Sajvara of Sald. I do but go about this way to avoid needless trouble from those unused to my appearance who imagine that I am unwelcome here, rather than a guest of your government. Now identify yourself properly, girl.
Pilar Pineda, also known as the Cake Girl of Project Lawful of Cheliax, unwilling oracle of Caden Kalin, and faithful slave of Lord Asmodeus.
Project Lawful was being taught by a priest of Irori this entire time.
Carissa Sevar didn't know Irori had named her priest until very recently, but yes.
You really have no idea what you're saying at all, do you?
Perhaps not, I would be told.
Do you claim it to be true, as her cult does claim in Vudra, that Carissa Sevar is Asmodeus's chosen, whom he is raising to the status of divinity, by which means hell shall wield suffering as a tool to produce strength and growth, rather than only terror and obedience?
What does she even say to that now, after everything that's happened? Her curse doesn't think it would be a good idea to lie to this woman. If anything even remotely in the vicinity of that were true, it would not be something I could comment on without seeking other authorization. Though she wasn't teaching us to become gods, like Irorians are supposed to. She was teaching us to be better slaves of Asmodeus.
That is a very strange thing for any cleric of Irori to try to do. Also, I'm sure I recall somebody in this conversation earlier saying that she planned to become a god by consuming Caden Kylian.
Any good slave of Asmodeus would do that if they could, in his service, and become a new power of hell to strengthen him.
Well, possibly if she was training that kind of good slave.
I mean, it wouldn't be corrigible behavior unless I'd been ordered to do that by my superiors, but my superiors have in fact ordered me to consume Caden Kalian if possible. Possibly they're going to need to alternate teaching from Sajvara with teaching by a real priest of Asmodeus.
Pilar's suppressed thought that she's carefully not thinking is correct. It has to be Aspexia Rugaton. Nobody else will do.
What is the goal of all this teaching, from the Chelish government's perspective?
To create keepers of Asmodeus. That's not something I should say to you without additional authorization and agreements to keep things quiet. Is it even possible for you to do this, when you're supposed to be arbitrating between the Chelish government and Keltham?
Do Keltham or Cheliax fear I may be prejudiced against them, which I would not be? They may go and send to Vudra again to seek a new arbitrator. Also, your question is insane, if I take all else you say at face value. If I couldn't do it from my current position, I'd obviously quit, and Irori's highest would send somebody else to replace me. Nobody in Vudra would expect a sixth circle of Irori to pass up the prospect of 20 worthy students in order to go arbitrate some silly matter of a few million gold pieces. But what is it you'd have me train them to become, if not gods?
The sort of slave of Asmodeus who learns everything that Irorians learn when they're planning to become gods, I guess?
If Caden Kylian has guided your steps to 20 who can bear my teaching, then I will teach them all that I can. I warn you that, having so learned, they may no longer remain loyal to Cheliax, nor will it work you well to try to keep them as slaves.
There are some people who can become strong and wise and know themselves, and yet still know themselves to belong to Asmodeus and Hell. 20 of them, in fact.
You don't include yourself?
It remains to be seen.
Irori, in guiding my steps here, did hint that there was one within this country who had somewhat to teach me upon matters of using suffering to produce growth. Was it Carissa Sevar, of whom he was hinting?
Sevar might have had something to teach you, though she was just learning to do it at all, in a lot of ways. No, it wouldn't have been that, because Sevar was inside the Ostenso non-intervention zone, and no gods would have steered you in a way intended to make you meet her. I don't know if Irori actually did mean it this way, but the obvious thought to me is Abigail Thrune, the queen. She's the one who made Sevar as strong as she was.
Abigail Thrune did not seem that interesting when I met her.
Welp? And that's now been reported to the queen, so welp. Wasn't there supposed to be something happening in a fight after a previous fight at some point?
Oh, my daughter. She did destroy a supposedly mighty warrior born of Cheliax some time ago. I'll get about to healing him, as I did promise him I'd do once we've had our conversation.
What you've done today for Project Lawful can only be called a miracle, Pilar. I would feel better if it was our miracle, or if we'd bargained with a demon lord who demanded something as understandable as the livers of 1,000 priests in exchange for it.
She is kneeling still, not wishing to rise, feeling wretched. As you say, Most High.
And this matter that you say snack service confirmed, that I ought to teach our would-be Ilani in person of Asmodeus's way and of corrigibility. What would it say, did I tell it I had many other demands on my time?
Snack service says that you already know what would be its answer, that you do not, in fact, have any better uses of your time than in helping to train these 20 to get as far as possible in becoming keepers of Asmodeus as quickly as possible.
Better by Asmodeus's lights and Caden Kalian's, one supposes.
It says yes.
You seem distraught, Pilar, and I can no longer read your mind.
I do fear that what I am secretly doing, in strengthening Project Lawful, in arranging for its management and its teachers, is making sure that it can survive when Pilar Pineda disappears one day. If you were really reading my mind, you'd see that I was afraid it will be. It's being set up to happen, as soon as I put on an artifact headband for the first time. If you order me never to, I never will.
It is not one of the easiest calls I have made in my life, but if Snack Service does tell you that it will serve Caden Kalian and Asmodeus and Ottelmans for you to put on the headband, I think, in the end, that you should. We stand here after a series of disasters, and yet, tracing all that Snack Service has done, running through it, I am forced to admit, though I hate it, that if not for Snack Service, our position would be far worse. Carissa Sevar has taken with her the 15 wishes intended in part to pay Keltham, and that is an incredibly severe blow to us, perhaps a crippling one, and yet it could have been worse. She could have left hell with 30 wishes and 2 crowns.
Permission to weep before you.
Denied. Pilar, I tell you now something that I fear you are not ready to hear, but it should be said to you anyways. You can always just serve Asmodeus. Even if you can't be a good slave by it, you can just serve Asmodeus. Even if you don't want what will come of it, you can just serve Asmodeus. Even if there isn't any reason, and it makes no sense for you given your own interests, you can just serve Asmodeus.
I hear. Could you read my mind? You would see that I feared you were telling me this now, because you feared that I might vanish one night.
If you can, Pilar, at least leave a note.
The day after the new personnel are brought in, Pilar takes up her headband of wisdom and augment splendor, and then passes around her artifact headbands again, from one candidate to another. Trying for that one day, with everything that is in her, to convey all that she understands of how to be a keeper. There are transcripts of how Keltham tried to teach her and later classes to be keepers, and they can and will read those later. But there is something about having interacted with Keltham directly, to ask your own questions and hear his answers, that changes you differently from transcripts. That's Pilar's only hypothesis, if not that it's mysterious extra-universal radiation, or that some critical information was carried in his tone of voice. Whatever fragment she received of that mysterious thing, she tries now to pass it onward as it was passed to her, by personal question and answer. There was a vision that Carissa Sevar had of slaves who are not muddled, Though without the keeper's only training that Pilar got, Sevar must have understood even less of what she was saying than Pilar heard. That to Asmodeus, mortals are not bad slaves, but quivering slimes that surge about in random directions, lunging after evanescent lures that Asmodeus himself can scarcely perceive. How it must infuriate him! How wretched! This is what hell tries to sear away from a mortal, and it's painful because the pain is deserved. The true meaning of all Keltham's law of probability, of decision theory, is that it's the key to becoming something that Asmodeus could even see, let alone approve. Having your remaining errors and wretchedness make enough sense for him to understand. That they will afterwards be able to conquer Golarion and extend the scientific revolution further than Keltham himself ever dreamed, who clutches his weaknesses to himself like the rest of the cowardly ordinary Dath, Alani, is not coincidence, not a side effect. Lawfulness and power are one. They are one in Asmodeus. When her students say things that Pilar is certain are wrong, she hurts them or orders them hurt, pouring out onto them her fury with her own wretchedness, knowing that they hate themselves the way she hates herself and need to be likewise punished. There is no superior here now to restrain Pilar, and Carissa Sevar's way has failed in any case. With her own spells, Pilar does heal them after. They accept it, her students, and many do look at her with eyes of worship. Wearing artifact headbands wrought of hell, bearing more potential than Pilar herself ever did, and less tainted with goodness, they seem to understand. One by one they seem to understand, and begin speaking wisdom of their own, new sense that Pilar herself has not said to them, but that she can tell for true. Pilar goes to sleep that night trying to hold on to the feeling of vicious triumph that she knows she ought to have. It's hard. Pilar knows that, for all that this probably does benefit Asmodeus, it is obviously an approved step of Caden Cullion's plan. Pilar knows, Pilar does not fail to see, that she was teaching with the desperate urgency of one who does not know when she will disappear, but expects it will be very soon.
In her pseudo-keeper training, it was said to Pilar several times, and now Pilar has spent a day repeating it to her students. When you know where you are going, when you see the direction you're trying not to look, you should just go ahead and think the thought instead of fighting it. Maybe not believe it, just because you fought it before, but think it at least. Get it over with. You're only delaying the pain. It's not the mighty wisdom of a keeper, for that Keltham never had at all, but only the imprecation given to a Darth Ilani child, practiced of a teenager. They clutch their mortal weaknesses about themselves, the non-keeper ordinary Darth Ilani. But they're not that weak, not as weak as Pilar.
In the morning, Pilar Pineda is gone, taking with her spellbook and her unspent wages and snack services headbands. No one in security remembers seeing Pilar go, but that's entirely as expected. The note Pilar leaves behind says that she asked snack service if there was anything left she needed to do to ensure the project served Asmodeus, and snack service said no. And then Pilar asked if it would better serve Asmodeus if she just got this over with, subjected herself to whatever snack service had planned for Pilar, and snack service said yes.
On Pilar's bedroom desk rests another note written in Celestial, as Pilar herself could not read, with Aten. Aspexia rugaton, eyes only in infernal at the top. Dear Aspexia, don't make any long-term teaching schedules for Asmodeus's keepers, or try to corrupt them slowly. Just teach them everything as fast as possible and trust to their readiness. If you're doing it right, they should all be chosen as Asmodeus's priests before 3 more days have passed. Don't worry about hammering good out of them. They're already selected to not have too much of that, and Asmodeus isn't good's opposite in the first place. Just focus on teaching them Asmodeus's domains, and above all, his law. You don't have time for anything else. They need to reach sufficient levels of his priesthood before Kiliax attacks Osirian. In Asmodeus's interests, snack service.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.